It's clear that water is the essential solvent of life and is important at every level of our being. Much of the remaining 30% of our bodies are macromolecules, polymers like proteins, DNA, and polysaccharides. Polymers are large compound composites made of small single units, subunits, called monomers, chemically linked to one another to form polymers. In this session, we'll learn about sugar, clearly the sweetest monomer you'll encounter. Here, let's take water. When we combine carbon to water, we get carbohydrates, which many of you know is the technical term for sugar or saccharide, which also means sugar. Different sugars can contain different numbers of CH2O units. The most common sugar, or monosaccharide, is glucose, which contains 6 carbons and has the general chemical formula C6H12O6. As you can see, glucose can form a cyclic structure that looks like a 6-sided ring, but notice, one of its corners is an oxygen linked to 2 carbons, carbon 1 and carbon 5. Carbon 6 actually lies outside the sugar ring. Note that sugars have a lot of hydroxyl groups and so are obviously very hydrophilic. Each hydroxyl can hydrogen bond to the surrounding water. That's why sugars so readily dissolve in water. Sugars can also chemically bind to one another to form more complex sugars. Linking 2 glucose molecules together forms a disaccharide called maltose. And many glucose monomers linked to one another can form different kinds of polymeric sugars, polysaccharides such as starch, glycogen, and even cellulose. Now, this might seem a bit confusing. How can a single type of sugar, glucose in this case, form so many different types of polymers? The answer lies in the special way the monomers can link together. Take a look at my hands. Let's say each represents a monosaccharide with carbons and hydroxyl groups. First of all, I have a right hand and a left hand. Actually, sugars come in 2 versions too. Right-handed sugars, designated D, for dextro, which is right in Latin, and left-handed sugars, indicated L, for levo, which means left in Latin. So glucose can be D-glucose or L-glucose, but D-glucose is by far the most common sugar in nature. For the sake of illustration, let's say I just happen to have 2 right hands. It's a bit odd, but it'll work. Combining 2 glucose monomers together is accomplished by linking between 2 specific carbons, one from each monomer. Here, carbon 1 is linked to carbon 4. This is maltose, remember the disaccharide I mentioned before. Repeating this can form a long chain of sugars linked 1 to 4, 1 to 4. This is basically the structure of starch. However, a single monomer within the chain can form multiple links, which lead to branched polymers. Let's say adding a sugar here to carbon 6, making many links and extending them. This makes glycogen. Linking the monomers differently in pure polyglucose generates starch, glycogen, and cellulose. Whereas each is 100% D-glucose, the way they can branch or not, and the length of the segments between the branches, and the specific carbons used to link, all generate very different polysaccharides. In the next session, we'll look at fatty acids and lipids. These make up the subunits of our membranes, and as we shall see, membranes not only surround our cells, but create subcellular compartments called organelles.